Today I want to talk to you about this lens right here, the Sony 50mm 1.4 G Master lens, a lens that has genuinely become one of my favorite lenses to shoot with over the past few months. So like I said, I purchased this lens a few months ago and have been shooting very extensively with it ever since then. And what I want to do in this video is just share, first off, some of the reasons I purchased this lens to begin with. I also want to share the overall experience shooting with this lens. I want to share a bunch of sample images and video that I created with it to kind of show you the image quality and the caliber of image that comes out of this lens, and hopefully help you answer the question, would this lens be right for you if you're in the market for a lens like this? So once I had decided on the 50mm focal length, I had to determine which actual version of this lens that I want to purchase from Sony. I knew that I wanted to purchase the Sony lens for one. I wanted to purchase a G Master lens, and so that really left me with two options: Sony's 50mm 1.4 lens or Sony's higher end, more expensive 50mm 1.2 lens. Now, credit where credit is due, a lot of the reasons I ended up going for the 1.4 versus the 1.2 is because a friend of mine, he goes by Magic. He's a photographer out of Poland, also a YouTuber, has incredible content on his channel. I'll link his channel down below, but he made an entire video comparing the 1.4 and the 1.2 head to head on a photo shoot. And Magic, I swear, I watched that video like 3 or 4 times. It was incredibly helpful for me in determining which lens I actually wanted to purchase. I will link that video down below if you want to check that out. He has a lot of sample images side by side of the same shot on both lenses, and those comparison images are really what tipped me over the edge towards the 1.4. So just to quickly go through a list of why I purchased the 1.4 versus the 1.2. First off is just size and weight. This lens is substantially smaller and lighter than the 1.2 version. For me, someone who travels a lot, just having lenses that are smaller and lighter definitely helps on the back when you're out doing a lot of stuff for a long time, carrying things through airports. Having smaller and lighter lenses are incredibly helpful. The 1.4 version also costs $700 less than the 1.2 version of the lens. I think at the time of recording, this lens is going for like $1,200 or $1,300 US versus the 1.2 lens is going for like $1,900 to $2,000 US. But back to Magic's video, and the thing that really kind of tipped me over the edge, I was always asking the question, like, would 1.2 make a difference for me? Like, am I going to regret purchasing a 1.4? Wish I had a 1.2. But after watching Magic's video, it felt like, number one, the 1.2 version of the lens was just overall characteristically a little bit softer. Now, obviously the background's going to be a little more blurry at 1.2, but just felt like the image in general was a little bit more of a soft image on the 1.2. The 1.4 felt like it was a lot sharper. The 1.4 felt like it had more character than the 1.2 did. And just the images that were coming out of that, just from looking at his video on the YouTube channel, it felt like this lens was going to perform better overall than the 1.2 would. And I can't think of any situations I've been in where I've been shooting at 1.4 at my aperture and gone, man, I really wish I had a 1.2. Like I could actually get this shot better. Like, it's a third of a stop. It's negligible difference in depth of field. And so I decided for all of those reasons to go with the 50mm 1.4. So now let's talk about my experience shooting with this lens. And honestly, this lens has been phenomenal. So like I said, I have used this lens extensively over the past few months, and I have genuinely fallen in love with shooting with it. When I purchased the lens, I absolutely expected to love it and use it quite a bit. I did not expect to use it as much as I actually do. I have genuinely done entire brand photo shoots using only the 50mm 1.4. It's just truly that good, and the versatility of it has been fantastic. All the things I mentioned that I saw on Magic's video with the contrast and the clarity and just the sharpness of the lens, all of that was absolutely confirmed, and I have shot way more on this 50mm than I ever thought that I would. The images coming out of this thing are incredibly sharp. The little micro contrast throughout the image is honestly noticeable, especially compared to like the Sigma 24-70 that I was using to cover that 50mm range. Now, I know it's not a fair comparison to compare the Sigma 24-70 Mark I versus the G Master, Sony lens that was built for these cameras, but the Sigma is what I was using to cover that focal length before, and genuinely the difference between that lens and what I've been able to achieve on this 50mm G Master lens has been incredible. The autofocus is super fast and quick. I've never had any issues with the autofocus hunting or trying to catch focus, even on a camera like the A7 IV that doesn't have the newest and greatest autofocus technology like the A9 III or the A1 II would have. Another thing I'll mention is the light flares on this lens. I've really fallen in love with just the way this lens handles light. Now, it's not like overblown and crazy light flares where you just can't recover anything, but whenever you kind of allow the light to leak around the edge of the corner of that lens, It's just a really beautiful way that it handles those light leaks, and I've absolutely been able to use those in some of the films I've created and some of the projects I've worked on because the character of this lens is so beautiful. And obviously size and weight is something I was considering, and that has absolutely held up. This lens is truly small. If you compare it to the coffee that I purchased this morning, like this is smaller than the cup of coffee, like a 12-ounce coffee that I have, and it's genuinely not that heavy either. And so being able to just kind of throw that in my camera bag, carry it around and not really think about it, but have a lens in my bag that can perform at that level when I need it to, has been really awesome. A couple other things to mention about this lens, which I think are just characteristic of G Master lens in general, but just to mention them since this lens has them, are number one, the customizable buttons on the lens. I have mapped these buttons to be a focus hold specifically for video. So when I'm shooting video, if I want to just stop the focus, I can press the button on the lens, which is super helpful to do. Another toggle on this lens is the option to click or declick the aperture ring, which for someone like me who shoots both photo where you'd want to have a clicked aperture ring and video where you'd want to have a declicked aperture ring is really, really helpful. And then I also really appreciate the iris lock switch on this, where you can either lock it to the automatic mode where then you control the aperture with your camera and the camera settings, or you can actually lock it onto the declicked side of things, which is honestly really nice because when you're manually moving the aperture ring like that, it actually prevents you from going back to the auto mode, which is just really helpful when you're filming. So a couple things like that I've really, really appreciated. So yeah, overall, those are my thoughts on the Sony 50mm 1.4 G Master. This has genuinely become one of my favorite lenses to shoot with, period. I cannot say enough good things about this lens, and it goes on my camera most everywhere I go. So all that being said, if you are in the market for a lens like this, I cannot recommend this lens enough. But hey, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on this lens, if you've used this lens and had a different experience, let me know down in the comments. If you've appreciated this video, please hit the like button. That genuinely helps. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Leave me a comment if you just want to say hi, and I will see you in the next video. All right, cheers.